picnic with Brooks Welch of Soul Sugar Joint. Brooks.
Yes, yes, yes. Hi.
Hurry down, hurry down. I just love your content. So sometimes late at night, I wake up in the middle of the night sometimes, and I start scrolling, and I come across content that's so much fun, and I just go, oh my gosh, this is what I love, because I love telling these stories. And then I try to dig in to kind of get, an understanding of what's happening, what the backstory is. And what I loved is the intergenerational, the intergenerational cross sections that you're doing. So like the intersections, I should say. Mm-hmm. So thank you for what you do on Soul Sugar Joint and on IG, and your DJing and
Oh, thank you. That always makes me feel so good when I hear how it's being received, because it definitely started. I just grew up in a family where music is just everything, and I'm glad that I have the parents that I have, because they gave me my good taste.
That's really refreshing for me as a parent, because I see my daughter and her taste in music, and I'm like, wow, all right.
Solid.
And I have to see, even for me growing up, I think one of my first records was I think it was Mano Dibango Sol Makusa. Was one of my first ones. Yeah, that was one of my first. I'm going through my people can't see, but maybe we'll be able to get some footage on here. I'm actually going through my 45s right now to see if I can find it. Oh, here's one of my first ones. If You Want Me to Stay, Sly Stone. This is my original 45 from the time I was young. What year did this come out?
Kept them.
Oh yeah, 1973. This is from 1970. I was 10 years old.
That is so cool.
I think that's when I started, I think 9, 10, I would go down to the record shop and I started buying my own little records. So yeah. I still have them. And I love them.
Oh, they're legendary. That's awesome.
Yeah. So let's talk about you and some of the first records and your journey and where you are now.
It's so funny because it's not I don't know. I love to talk about my love of music. My parents, they raised me on Earth, Wind and Fire, Stevie Wonder, but mainly Michael Jackson. We heard Michael Jackson.
Okay, that's fair.
And
that's fair, because that's what was happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of gospel music. I grew up on Mary, Kirk Franklin, Ty Tribbett, all these different artists growing up in church. And then my own personal love of music came from I know that when I became a fan of music, it was because of Disney Channel. So pop music, Disney pop, the Jonas Brothers. And then as I got older, One Direction. And then I had my awakening of just things happening in the world. At the time, Mike Brown was murdered, and it was really very sad and scary. And I was in high school, and I just felt my whole paradigm shifted. And it's kind of interesting how that really did affect how I interacted with media and how I interacted with culture. And so I was more interested in people who looked like me and sounded like me, and I started to get more interested in artists like The Internet, and then their sound is very jazz based, and so because of that, I never made the connection that because I grew up on jazz music, especially with my grandpa, he was a jazz drummer, and Earth, Wind and Fire is jazz funk music, and then my dad loves jazz chords, that of course I would love it, but for some reason I was just oh, this is good to me. I don't know why. And then it just started going into this discovery and me cultivating my own sound. But I love to rediscover and revisit and to bring my own personal connection to the albums that I grew up on. And I like to call it timeless music. I don't like to call it old, because especially with streaming, we have access to so much. And it doesn't matter what era or decade it's from. If it has a certain sound, then it could pop up in your request, in your suggested songs on different platforms, even if it was from the 70s and you still like it.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of,
Absolutely.
I've just been open to it.
And thank you for being open to it, because there's a lot of amazing music. And I think that's one of the caveats of streaming, that it allows us to really explore and dig into crates in a different way. Because, when I was growing up, you had to have a physical record. So this cabinet behind me, that's where my records are. That's where most of my albums are.
It's a big closet, y'all.
Yeah. Most of them are there. But, for me, it was, discovering, because I literally would have to go to Sam Goody, which was our local record store back then. Radio Shack didn't sell records or anything, or Corvettes, or, like some of these stores, which was kind of like, Corvettes was kind of like, almost like Target back in the day. And, these stores, these department stores, was a department store. And I grew up in Mount Vernon, New York. So we'd go down, which is right next to the Bronx. So we'd go to the Bronx and pick up our records, and, and I think there was a record shop. Oh yeah, I had an uncle that had a record shop also in my town. So we would go and buy these records. But, this is the other part that I just find interesting when you're saying, things about jazz, because a lot of these bands started off as jazz bands, like Kool and the Gang started off as a jazz band, Earth, Wind and Fire, they were playing jazz, and the jazz of that time was slowly making a transition, into something that was more of dance music. So it was because jazz was the pop music of an era at one time.
Yes.
So people tend to forget that there was, of course, hard bop, but there was jazz that was danceable. And there was like a softer jazz, if you're looking at Cole Porter or something like that. But then there was jitterbug, so there were all these different rhythms and shuffles, and there were the jazz artists who wanted to stay true to the art. But then there was also an appeal, and I think that there was something happening culturally in the country. Also, when you're looking at the 60s and you're looking at the 70s and you're looking at, what's happening in the wars, the Vietnam War and stuff like that, and how everybody was transitioning, and there was a different level of awareness. So if you look at those early, like Earth, Wind and Fire records, or, Donald Byrd and the Blackbirds, or, Weather Report, or what was it? The group that the Crusaders, the Jazz Crusaders, and a lot of them were crossing over into pop music.
Yes. I'm actually reading a book about funk music. I have it over here. It's called Funk by Ricky Vincent, and they kind of talk about that. Well, he talks about that a bit, like especially Earth, Wind and Fire going more into disco and starting to retreat away from jazz funk, and just kind of like the betrayal and how people are just like, that's not Earth, Wind and Fire anymore. Like, I guess the real diehard, like purists of Earth, Wind and Fire are like, September is not Earth, Wind and Fire. And I just think that's so interesting.
Right. Yeah. And I remember listening to some of their early records. There was, Keep Your Head to the Sky, and the album Spirit.
Oh, the album's so good.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have the sheet music. I was a piano major in college, so I would buy. I think my first piece of sheet music, which was so funny, was Hollywood Swinging by.
Fun, cool.
Like, what am I going to do with this? I think maybe I'm sure I could play it now, but when I was, 10-year-old Charyn, no.
Right.
But I was like, this is so cool. I still have it. I still absolutely have it. But looking at, like, even now, there's kind of like a retro thing going. And, you mentioned the internet also, and their whole story is really interesting. There's a really fascinating movie that talks a little bit about it. The World Is Yours, I think is what it's called. I'm going to look it up, and I should know the name of it.
Okay.
But yeah, so I'm going to share. I'll share that with you. But
please.
Yeah, I think you would really love it, because it looks at them at the beginning. And I used to work in a youth center, and Sid was one of the students in the youth center. I worked
world.
And it was really funny, because I ran the music department, and she never came into the music department, which was So what we've talked about that. We've had conversations
Well, it's
about
known
that.
that it's a little shy.
She's shy, but she could talk. That girl could talk. So I'm gonna get her on here though. But because I think how you guys are influenced by your families, and you're just kind of like, this is really cool and really open and not really following trends. And I think I was that generation that followed the trends. And you guys are like, this is just really good music.
Well, that's interesting you say that because I think trends is like a keyword now with the actual like World Wide Web internet. Like everything is
Right.
about trends and whatnot. But I do think that people love, of course, I mean, it's just refreshing in general. Like, you bringing up, yeah, definitely trends and kind of just not being too caught up in that. I think that they're fun to be relatable. Like, you can do something that feels timely through trends, but making that your whole basis, I think you would just be chasing after, like you'd be like a hamster in a wheel. It's not sustainable.
I have to, yeah, it's not sustainable. And that's kind of been an argument that I have when I'm speaking to students, for instance, who I'm like, okay, you could do so much more and you have to think of longevity.
Yeah.
But there's just been this like kind of fast food, I always call it like fast food music, where you want to get a hit, you want to make a couple of dollars. That's great. A lot of people were one hit wonders.
Yeah.
But do you want to have a career? Do you want to, what is your purpose for being in music?
That's it. Yeah.
What is your purpose? Do you have a message? Because when we look at some of the artists, especially when you're saying, your catchphrase, I always love that. Music that has me in a chokehold. I love that.
Thank you.
Right. It's like, I'm just kind of like, oh my gosh, that it's so meaningful because it has so much power in how you are looking at that music and how it impacts you.
Oh, thank you.
So how did you come up with that phrase?
Oh, I was going to tell you. I'm so glad you asked. So it was funny because I just sat down. I had all of my recording stuff and I just try to show up, especially on my recording days. So I just sat down and I had my camera going and I really wanted to talk about this new song that I found called Whenever by Gareth Donkin. And I was like, man, this song is so good. How can I talk about it? And I just started recording. And then the first words that came out of my mouth were songs that have me in a chokehold. And then I was just like, I just realized that I started an outline without writing it down. And I was just like, okay, let's just go for it. So I fully did what I had been thinking about because I've been ruminating on this idea for a long time of I guess just the way that I listen to music, I always go, ooh, what does this remind me of? So when I was listening to Whenever by Gareth Donkin, I was like, oh, this reminds me of Michael. This reminds me of El DeBarge. This reminds me of Patrice. And then I just put that in the video. And I sat on that video for so long because, I don't know, it was just kind of scary. I hadn't done a video in that format before. And I just didn't know if I was being a little too excited on the internet. And it's just really sad. And I know that Tyler, the Creator, talks about it all the time and it was just coming from my heart of being I guess this is the best way I could put it is songs that have me in a chokehold.
Right. Songs that have you. But, I think that's the best way to make something happen, to just be organic about it, to not try to, because how many times do we look on the internet and because we have the internet and people are like, oh, see me, I want to be seen, I'm doing all this crazy stuff. But you're just the joy, I would scroll through your feed and just the joy that you had from listening to this music. I was like, this is what it's all about.
I think so too. Music should be fun.
Because it's something that I bring up a lot. The thing that attracted me to music was how it made me feel. Mm-hmm. And the messaging around it and what was going on in the time. And it just made me forget everything. There aren't a lot of artists at this point where I'm just I could just follow them to the ends of the earth. Sometimes do you have any artists like that where you're like, I could just follow them to the ends of the earth?
Absolutely. They tend to be in that series. Yeah, I love Gareth Duncan's stuff. That boy, he has such an understanding of chords that is just like it's ear candy. So he's someone that I'm really excited about. Also Cleo Soul. I love her message and I love the sound that she evokes. It's very like I mean, you could say 70s, but I feel like it's a little bit like 60s Motown like.
Okay.
And then I follow closely really anything produced by D Mile. I follow producers pretty closely.
Yes, yes, yes.
But yeah, those are a few. And of course, like Stevie Wonder. But like those are like, way I mean, I guess it ranges. I feel like Stevie Wonder is one of those people like I could list them, but it's just almost like it's known. Like I just love him. And I think that he was one of my first artists that my parents put me onto that I personally was like, wait, I'm going to take him and his discography and, sit with this and learn about him for myself. And I have a special connection to his work.
And it's interesting watching the evolution of these writers because, he was somebody who, or he is somebody who, started off in a very distinct way and just has grown and also changed with the times. And you'll hear his stuff in clubs. But then, like, one of my favorite records is The Secret Life of Plants.
Oh, interesting.
I love that record. I really, really do. I love Inner Visions. I love there's so much. There's so much. Yeah. And I love the songs that he wrote for other people.
Yeah.
Because there were songs that people didn't realize when you're looking at, Tell Me Something Good for Rufus and Shaka Khan. People didn't realize that he wrote that. I heard Brand New Heavies did a cover of I Don't Know Why. I Don't Know Why I Love You, I think is the name of it. And it's just so dope.
I need to hear that. I need to hear
it's so dope. Bet You Wouldn't Hurt Me, which was sung by Patty Austin on a Quincy Jones record. So, because I'm really into songwriters.
Okay. Yeah. And I think that's so cool too, like having your own relationship with the credits and being like, okay, I love this songwriter and understanding kind of like the themes and the things that are recurring and really diving into what you like about it. Like as an English nerd, like how we had to go in and annotate different things. It kind of reminds me of that, where you're just like really diving into the literary aspect of it.
Yeah, it's like it's not only the lyrics, it's how the music makes you feel, it's the layers around it. And it's just really appreciating the art of music, because it should take you on the journey. And that was the thing for me growing up, that I saw. How do you think people are listening to music now?
I don't know. I don't like to think of like everything being so like changing. I don't know. It's interesting. Like I guess the ethos of my whole account is like nothing is new under the sun. And so I think that people still have a feeling when they listen to music. Like it's all about feeling. And that's why I try to evoke on my account, because I hear a lot of, music reviews or discussions, and I love getting into that too. But it's just like, no, this song just makes me feel good, and you can't always articulate it. It's just, it's seen and it's shown through how you are smiling or how you just have to dance or like you can't contain yourself. And I see that even on TikTok, where people will have videos of them listening to a song or having the audio of a song, and they're just like dancing, and then they like have text on the screen that's like, this song just is so like, and it's all about that feeling that it gives you. And I don't think that people really have changed in that way. Of course, people have they listen to music for different reasons. Some don't even listen to music on their own. They only listen to music when they go out. So they only know what's hot or what DJs are playing that is mainstream, depending on what type of parties they go to or whatever gatherings they go to. So I just think it's such like a personal thing. And that's why I like to keep a subjective tone with my music and how I cover it, because making it objective and making it seem like I know everything and saying, feeling offended when someone brings up something that I haven't heard yet I just find it to be really silly, especially because it closes off conversation around it and it only limits my ability to learn more about the music that I love. And I think that music and listening to it, it should be a social and a social experience. It shouldn't just be in a vacuum, because it's way more fun to share music with other people and to know that you found someone else who gets it and understands. Because it's a terrible feeling when you love a song and then you look over to your friend like, listen to this, and they just don't get it. But if you met someone who feels it the same way that you do, and they're like really excited, then you're like, yes, you are my people, like finally. So that's to answer your question, I think that it kind of, I don't think it has ever changed. Of course, it just is through different formats and different modes, having the internet now and whatnot, social media.
Yeah, I try to imagine. Okay, so I went to Africa many, many years ago. I was in Senegal, and I went to a club, and they were playing Michael Jackson like almost on a loop.
Oh, wow. I would have loved being there.
It's like about every other record was like, they just idolized Michael Jackson. And that was, and it made me raise a question, like, are there artists here? And back then there were probably, Afrobeats wasn't really happening the same way. There were African art, there was Miriam Makeba, there was Hugh Masekela, but what was new and fresh to them was a different standard to what was new and fresh to us in the United States. Yeah. But talking, girl, let me tell you, I never partied so hard. These guys, I had another friend of mine, we were like barely out of our teens and gone there, and they came to pick us up at the hotel like maybe about 11, 12 o'clock, and we partied to 6 in the morning.
My friend, she just traveled. She told me it is like that. It is like that. Wow.
And it was the norm. And it was like the norm. It was like they were like all fresh and ready to go. We're like
built different.
But it's like, and ooh.
But to your point, though, I really like that the topic you brought up about there being artists and how over there the standard is different. I also think that it might be affected by even how our music industry is set up and what we actually value. Whereas over there, it might really be the feeling, it might really be the music, and it's the quality of living and just what they care about is different. But then over here, It really is a industry, and they have agendas of like, this is the new pop star. We have so much invested in this person, paying people to play this song on the radio or to get this trending on TikTok. Like, it's about, these different contracts happening. And so I don't think, I do think that it also the artist might be generation based. So like, I feel like for my generation, it's like Drake or Nicki Minaj or and that's why it's just, I like that people do have their own sense of taste in music and whatnot, but I do think that when it comes to the artists who are speaking for a full generation, it's just whoever is popular, and sometimes that is affected by the bigger idea at large, the bigger force at large.
Well, I think so. But I also feel that there is this segment of, it's so funny for me to say young people, but I'm like, there's a segment of youth, a segment of young people that, they're listening to music differently. They're looking at, maybe like what somebody like you is putting out on your feed, but they're also are creating playlists, whether it's on Pandora or whatever streaming services, because music is not being played on the radio. And there's a lot of great music and a lot of great artists that have huge followings. I remember when, like, for instance, Rockhampton and Omar Apollo were coming out, and they were getting ready to do shows. I was like, well, wait a minute, they're not played on mainstream radio, because remember, back in the day, you waited for a new record to be broken on the radio.
just my whole thing is that I don't want anybody to think there's no good music anymore, because that's just not true. And then I don't want anybody to think that, oh, that music in the past is old, because that's not true either. Everything
Right.
can exist. They can coexist.
Right. And, and the other thing is because there's like a whole retro movement that's really happening also in
Right, with
music,
vinyls and everything.
with vinyls. But what I'd love to do right now, oh, well, first of all, let's remind people that they can follow you at the Soul Sugar Joint on IG.
Yes.
And hear all of your great content in your broadcast channel, Sugar Cubes. I'm a member, y'all. I'm a Sugar Cube. I'm seasoned. I just really find it very valuable to understand what, younger generations are listening to share things, to see what's happening in different movements and social movements. But you think your generation, do you think you guys like go out and dance like the same way? Is it the same? Like being up in the club? Is it the same?
It's funny. I mean, when I was back home, I'm from Grand Rapids, Michigan. And I would say, yeah, we go out and dance like we do. And then it might look different. It's not like, I think it depends on where you go. Like people, they want to say like, oh, we're just like on the wall and we don't, we don't move anymore. We don't dance anymore. But it also just depends on where you go. Now being in Brooklyn, yes, like I actually see like dancers. So I guess being in a bigger city and depending on who the DJ is and what the vibe that was promoted is supposed to be, like if it's like this is a dance party, then people come out. So I don't know, but I could say that, based off of the, watching Soul Train or watching movies or, if it really was like house party back then I could say no, it's definitely not the same as like house party. But I don't know, maybe I just go to whack parties. I love to see people dancing, and I do sometimes, but people love to hit a little 1-2 step.
Yeah, well, and being in New York, you have outlets like Soul and the Horn. I know you've had Body and Soul and before, which is really because those DJs, I think, are more reminiscent, of the movement, the dance movements. Because for me, growing up, going to Paradise Garage and, and some of those spots, Tony Humphries, the Shelter, isn't the Shelter, I think, still happening with Merlin Bob, possibly. But we used to dance. Like we used to sweat and dance, and it was a release. And now I just kind of feel like nobody wants to get down and dirty, in terms of
what's the point?
Nobody wants to get, it was like, we didn't go with makeup on and heels and we'd be in our sweats or our t-shirts, and the guys would wear these like baggy pants and they had these karate shoes. It was like the Get Down. Remember that show,
wow,
The Get Down?
I love The Get Down.
I love The Get Down. That show was everything. Like, I used to sit there and watch it and go, oh my God, that's my time. That was it.
Man, it was my favorite show. It's like top 3 for me, like all time. It's so well done. I think that also went into me starting to understand, oh, okay, I really like the 70s. Like that show confirmed it for me. And then, the real history behind it and how artfully they told it. And yeah, they did their big one. It was so well done.
Yeah, it was. And I was crushed when it ended. I was
really
it's like I couldn't get enough of it.
No,
I could
seriously.
not get enough of it. Yeah. Because it was visually beautiful to watch, and the music,
the
and then understanding what was the character, the development. It was just, they were so complex.
Yes.
So I'm like, come on, bring it back. So that storytelling, how do we kind of keep that storytelling alive? Because I feel like not only do we listen to music, we just take everything in differently. It's like, we've got to see the visuals.
Yeah. Visuals to music, and also just like film to music is so important. Like
Right.
I also was raised on like Spike Lee joints. So
Yes.
his, love of jazz music coming through and it actually being like so imperative to the actual film. Sylvie's Love is another jazz film that's really good. You had like Brown
Right.
Sugar, you had all these other films
Oh,
that
Love
music was
Jones.
at the
Love
center.
Jones
Yeah,
was,
Love
yeah,
Jones.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm a
yeah.
more
It's like the
music
music,
drama.
the music supervision. Like, I think you would make a great music supervisor.
Yeah, put it out there. Yeah, thank you.
You'd make a fantastic music supervisor because understanding the sensibility and how it makes people feel and how it tells a story,
Yeah.
and captures an era. And I think it's as jazz, yes, was timeless, but I think this was a really important slice when you're looking at soul music. Like, I really love blaxploitation films and the
Ooh.
music around. I was talking to somebody. I said, you know what? I think I want to do like I want to have some people over in my backyard and like show Shaft or something.
Yeah, do it.
Because I love the soundtrack, and Marcus Miller also does the Black movie soundtrack at the Hollywood Bowl. He
Oh.
does it every other year. So if you're ever out in LA, I think he just did it in 20. We're in 2024. I think it might happen this summer.
Oh,
So
I would
yeah,
definitely do
that's something that you gotta. It's so much fun to hear these songs with an orchestra.
that.
You know.
Orchestra?
With an
Oh my
orchestra.
God.
Yeah. So
Wow.
you hear, there are bands, there's the band, there's the rhythm section element, but it's really, songs like they'll do different movies. I think they did Waiting
Oh
to
my God.
Exhale last
I
year,
would
but
start crying.
I've seen
So
them do like
sweet.
Claudine and the theme from Shaft and a lot of the Curtis Mayfield music
Hmm.
because it was
Yes, the
so
Tupac.
complex. It's so complex, and I love disco strings and the strings, the
Yes.
R&B strings, and I don't know if I used to play with Barry White also, so hearing, just understanding all of that music and the arrangements
Oh,
is it's so much fun.
yes. And it also reminds me of a New Deco Ensemble. They do a really good job of
Yes,
yes.
yeah,
Playing
there are a
they did it
couple.
Pharrell. They did I love that they
Yes,
worked with Masego and had him do yams. Like I think it's
yeah.
so cool to hear our music done with full orchestras because I feel like it's a validating and affirming combination of being like this isn't just like
Right.
808s and there's like little beat pads and it's not this little simple stuff like it's complex arrangements and there's so much in this that we can have a string section and we can have horns and all of this.
Oh, absolutely. And some of the arrangers are still around, like Paul Reiser, who was the major Motown arranger. Piranha
Oh,
Head is who's from Detroit, he's from Detroit, and he's kind of the one who's been doing like Victoria Monet and Les Nubians and just
wow.
really
Woo.
great arrangements and just fantastic. So I feel that just like we had Holland Dozier Holland and Gamble and Huff to bring to light the contemporary writers and arrangers,
Hmm.
because there are these people who are making this music and bringing it to life and really respecting the art form. So that's the other
Yes.
part of it that I think is just so critical. How it, digging into how it makes you feel. Why do we dance? Why does this impact us so much?
Right, right. And it making it and just understanding the fun of it, right? Like the feeling behind it, because it could get real intellectual, it could get real like, oh, I know everything about this. But at the same time, it's just like, man, like that's not why anybody got into this. You heard a song and it made you feel something. That's like
Right.
that brings you back down to earth.
Yeah, because you have these people who have this gift of telling a story, Ashford and
Yes.
Simpson, for instance. And that's like a whole master class right there when you're
Yeah.
looking at, what they have contributed to music. And there were so many
Yeah. And I've been really
that
inspired by
are-
Victoria
Yeah.
Monet,
Oh,
her
yes.
last album, Jaguar 2. It just
Yes.
blew me away. I was not expecting that, but I did know that
Yeah.
she also someone said that she makes music for people who grew up with old head parents. And I was like, I guess, like, because my parents, they grew up on, you know, the 70s, the 80s music, but she brings it into the modern day so well. And she also is like a string arrangement head. And I love
Right.
just how lush her sound is. And
Right. And that's Piranha and Jeff Giddy,
okay.
Jeff Giddy Gittleman, you know, they're the producers, and Giddy's been on the show. He's also my neighbor, by the way, which I think is hilarious. So
Wait, D Mile is his name Giddy?
no, not D Miles, but Jeff Giddy is one
Oh.
of the producers on there too. He produced on
Oh.
My Mama. Yeah.
Whoa. Okay, I
Yeah,
didn't know
yeah, yeah,
that.
yeah. Yeah,
Man,
yeah.
he needs
So
more shine.
yeah, so there are just so many, you know, and that I think is really important to that, you know, to acknowledge. And I just so love, you know, again, what you do in terms of the crate digging and reading the names and understand who does what. Um, because there are all these people on the back end that we don't always know these stories. We see who's out front and we're like, we're in awe who's out front. We're in awe of the person who's delivering the message, which I kind of call them like they're the driver, you know, but there are
Yeah.
all these conductors on the back end also that really help to
Oh,
make everything
100%.
happen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was my
yeah, yeah.
friends in high school who they made music and they would post it on SoundCloud. And I remember one of my friends telling me that the term to use when the being the one who's making the beat or whatever is called the producer. And then I was like, oh, what? So then it was like, yeah, you know, Pharrell, like he's the producer. And I was like, oh, really? So then I'm listening to like, you know, seeing Kanye as a producer, seeing Pharrell as a producer, seeing all these different people who it's like, oh, this song is by Mariah Carey or this song is by Justin Timberlake, but then understanding that, okay, but Pharrell or Kanye are behind this as the producers. And I'm over here like, wait, they're the reason why I like this song, to be honest. But it's like also like when it's an amazing collaboration, it's just like you couldn't imagine anybody else taking this piece that this person produced and actually bringing life to it. But as a person who grew up on jazz, like I said, in like the instrumental production of music always being like actually the most important part to me, because I could listen to music with no lyrics, I could listen to music with no vocals if the music is good. And I think that that's what carries a song. But when you do have a great vocalist or they just really understand the assignment, it just takes it to a whole nother level. But yeah, definitely give more shine to producers, because man, we
Yeah.
wouldn't have these amazing songs without them.
Yeah, and they also, I think, help to inspire the artist to be that
Absolutely.
storyteller, which I think is, you know, is really, really important as well. And the movie is it's yours. It's yours, a story of hip hop and the internet.
Wow. Okay.
So
I
yeah,
can't
so
wait.
really, yeah. I think it might be on Vimeo now,
Okay.
but really, really a powerful film. And I'm trying to get her to do more screenings around because I saw it. I was like blown away, blown
Wow.
away. Yeah, yeah. But I just love that, you know, you're bringing so much access to people about music, about different types of music, and being so open because for us in California, I find that, well, first of all, I don't really know what they're playing on the radio, but it used to be that they would play the same songs over and over again. And I almost felt like whoever paid the most money to the radio station or for promotion, I see you nodding your head. You're like,
Yes.
yeah. I feel like those were the songs you would hear over and over again in rotation.
Yeah.
And they were pushing that agenda, which it kind of, there are a couple of things that happen. That artist gets a lot of play, so they get more royalties
Hmm.
because they're getting so much play. Because you know it's almost like streaming, but they're getting a different type of royalty, a different royalty structure actually, because it's going through ASCAP and BMI or CSAC or whoever their PRO performance rights organization is, and Sound Exchange, and you know all that stuff on the back end. So they're making more money essentially because they've put the money, or their promotion people or label have put the money into that song.
Yes.
Like I would hear a lot of Taylor Swift. I'd hear a lot of Drake. I'd hear a lot of Beyonce. And I would say that those were probably the top three. But then you go to different parts of the country and there's like a totally different thing happening. Like, you know, you being in New York, I grew up listening to WBLS, for instance. So I get club music. I'd get what was happening in New York regionally. And I would, you know, there was back then it was like a lot of New Jack Swing, Uptown Records was like the mainstay.
Yeah, I love
that's like a whole conversation right there, because it was really a lot of fun and it was like cross dance. But then we would also get the music from the UK. So we'd get Craig David and we would get, you know, a lot of Sade, and there was stuff that we would get before it went across the country.
Yeah. Yeah, and definitely the regional thing is so true, because I mean, it sounds like you grew up on good music that the radio was serving you. Like here, I mean, not here, but in my hometown, Grand Rapids, it's just not like that unless you have like an independent radio station. So like the major ones, they're definitely pushing the mainstream songs that, like you were saying, has the agenda behind them. But that's why I think music curators are so important, and they always have been. DJs, radio disc jockeys were the music curators that you see. I mean, I would be in this position if there wasn't a radio disc jockey. Like, I'm really only doing what they have done, just finding a new way of doing it, where they would break these songs, or they would put you on, or they're just like, oh, I love this song, and it's because of their taste level. I mean, you think about how Quiet Storm, it started at Howard University, and that being a whole genre of music that is that now, if anything, is pretty slow paced or just has like a nice feeling to it. People call it Quiet Storm, where it was a show and it wasn't a genre, but it turned into a genre. So
bedroom pop is another one.
Yes, bedroom pop. Yeah, with the right.
My daughter's like, it's bedroom pop. I was like, okay, all right. I'm with it. I'll go for that. I'll go for that.
Oh yeah, I was all into that too.